Hello and welcome to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efrain Martinez. I am a principal in search of wisdom, and I have found productivity to be a great tool for success. Today, I have the great and distinguished honor of having with me Dr. Nancy B. Gutierrez,
Hola,
who is a
hola.
hola. She is a former teacher and principal, now serving as the president and CEO of the Leadership Academy. This nonprofit has created a national model for teaching and inspiring leadership at every school system level. With Roberto Padilla, Nancy co-author Stay and Prevail. Students of color don't need to leave their communities to succeed. This is the Kindle version. With a strong message of confidence, mainly directed at leaders of color, that the answer is in the room.
That's
It
right.
is quite an honor to have Nancy to share her wisdom and her productivity and also to answer questions about her new book, Stay and Prevail. Dr. Nancy B. Gutierrez,
Hola,
who
hola.
are you?
Who am I? I am a Chicana. I am a new mom, an older mom. I have he's almost 1 year. Took us quite a while to have him, and we're really blessed that he's here on this earth and doing great. I am a product of my ancestors. I am the daughter of Maria del Socorro Escobedo Gutierrez, the daughter of Antonio Gutierrez, and the granddaughter of Soledad Castillo, Beatriz Gutierrez, and Jesus Gutierrez. And I am a daughter of the sun. I am a CEO, is what you called me, but we've actually dropped the chief in honor of our
Mm.
Indigenous community. So I'm an LEO, lead executive officer. And that inspiration and wisdom, as you say, comes from my homegirl, Veronica Crespin Palmer out of Colorado, who modeled the way forward. And there's so much more I could say, but that is where I will stop today.
Wow. I love that you guys changed CEO to LEO. I think that's truly innovative. Thank you so much. We began the right way. So, Nancy, the way I got introduced to you and your work was with an article titled "The Answer is in the Room."
Ándale.
So, my first question then is, can you walk us through your professional trajectory up to this point and how you end up writing that article and why?
So that I love, by the way, I loved writing that piece. And that was actually, if you look at the date, I want to say it was October 2018 when I first became LEO of the Leadership Academy. That was 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago. And my trajectory up to that point was that and what I'm most proud of, and what actually the book, what Stay and Prevail really features, is we're trying to really lift up and highlight those who gave back to the home that raised them. Too often we are waiting for Superman to fly in and save the day, or we're sending Supermen in or Superwomen in to save Black and Latino communities when really the richness and the beauty and the brilliance of our communities, of our leaders, are right there within our home. And so I am most proud that I gave back to the community that raised me. And so, I love that you bring that up. Efrain, can I call you Efrain or Dr. Martinez?
Absolutely,
Yes.
Efrain.
Ándale. I love that you bring that up, because I think in it I really highlight my mom, and I highlight the way she would always tell us that if we wanted our community to be what it could be, that we were the ones to be the change we wanted to see. And she would take us over to Dorset Elementary right across the street, and we would pick up trash on Saturdays. And she was always in service, even on holidays. Instead of sitting down and enjoying this amazing meal. I mean, we would go out in this, like, this beat up van she drove, and she would have us take bags of, groceries and just plant them at the doors of people who she knew needed them more than we did. And she would also, our home was always a home for everyone. So we never really had our own room. We never had, like we were always inviting people to stay with us who needed a little help, a transition period, whether it was 6 months, whether it was a year, 2 years, whether they were family or they were people that we knew from church or from work or wherever. But I think I came to that answers in the room, through my trajectory of giving back to my home, through teaching, being a principal of two different middle schools, and through the amazing example of my mother, who to this day really grounds a lot of the way I think about leadership and the way I think about who I am and who I want to be moving forward.
Beautiful. In the article, you praise Mr. Lovelace
Ah,
for
lovely.
being the first, I guess, uh, educator perhaps in a school building who made you believe that who you were. Can you tell us about that?
Back in the day, because this was, and I don't care if people know my age. Back in the day, um, you know, we didn't call it equity. We called it multicultural education or, what have you. But Mr. Lovelace, he was the first person to really help me understand what culturally responsive teaching and learning looked like, through the lens of a student. And the way he did that was that he was the first person to introduce me and my classmates in East San Jose, predominantly Chicano community, a community that is very underestimated, a community that people think is dangerous. They have all these mental models of what it is, and it's actually an amazing place to visit, to be in community. And um, he was the first one to ever expose me to like an author of color. We read Maya Angelou. He would also help us really understand literature in ways that were very creative. We studied similes and metaphors using Tracy Chapman's Fast Car, which I know there's a new kind of version of Fast Car right now that's out. But I remember, in eighth grade, that was what we would do. We would listen to music, we'd break it down. Of course, I ended up wanting to be like Mr. Lovelace, create classrooms where I could really connect to my students in ways that were meaningful. And so that's what he did for me. He also helped me want to be a little cholia, to total wannabe, not legit in the least, but you know, um, taught me to like really connect with learning and love learning. Helped me see myself as capable and smart in a way that I never had in the past. It was just a real blessing, a real angel in my life. And to this day, Lovelace and I are in touch. And he still is very strict. Let me tell you. He still
Yeah.
tells me, "Yeah, man, if I ever write anything, I'm nervous actually about what Lovelace is going to say about Stay and Prevail." It's
That's
because he
awesome.
always tells me the truth, and he'll do it through an email, and he'll do it through a text, and I'll be like, "Oh God, what does Mr. Lovelace think?"
So, like, one of the questions of the show is usually asked a little bit later, but it connects with this one. Um, it's a question of the imposter syndrome,
Mm,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I think one of the things I identify the most with your work in the answers in the room and also in Stay and Prevail is that often we are raised in environments where the educators, although usually well intended, they say things
Mm,
that you guys term micro and macro aggressions when it's for the whole group, that make us believe throughout our lifetime that we might not be enough to be
mm.
in certain positions or leading certain things. How have you addressed this issue in your professional trajectory? Any experience you want to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting, because I mean the truth is that even those of us who came home and gave back have probably done it too, in ways that are harmful, in ways that we have to actually own. I always think about Kendi. He always says, if we just all accepted that we're all racist, like we'd be able to have a conversation about it. So I don't want to ever come across like we are calling out these terrible people. What I want to call across is a mindset our bias-based beliefs are things that we all, as Beverly Tatum talks about, it's smog, it's the air we breathe. Like we were all raised in this environment of inequities and of racism and have become um, part of perpetuating things that we don't that are not helpful. So yeah, I've experienced imposter syndrome, and I've also experienced feeling like I wasn't enough in many settings. And I think you know the first time it started happening to me, if I'm being honest, because I was a teacher and a principal in my home community, and I've always felt very loved out in East San Jose by my people. It wasn't until actually I left to Harvard after being a principal of two middle schools, which we know is such an incredible job, and it builds your confidence, and you're the directora and you're or the maestra. You're always the maestra, maestro, right? Um, and you would think that I would be able to, after doing some amazing work at home, I'd be able to go to a place like Harvard and just really um, thrive. And I think I struggled with feeling like I didn't belong, and I think a lot of folks of color feel that way. A space not really created for us, but a space we were kind of you know moving our way into over time. And it took a lot of intentional practice on my end. For example, if I think about Elizabeth Cohen's work on cooperative learning, and this is for kind of the K-12 space, but I can apply it anywhere. It's really about like whose voices are being heard, and when someone's voice is heard, people assign status to that voice, and people begin seeing that person as smart and capable. And so there were moments when I was like, I know this work because I used to do that with my students. Why I had the little sticks, make sure I was calling on students. That's why I was making sure that everyone had a chance to really be heard and seen. You got to say something, even if it's just asking a question. You got to do it. So I'd give myself these little challenges, and over time got more and more comfortable with my cohort, and also got more and more comfortable with like the type of brilliance I brought to the room. It didn't have to look
Mm.
and sound a certain way. And I think when I heard the word Harvard, or whatever setting you're in, like you're like, I gotta like kind of succumb to what I think is expected of me versus who I am. Can I actually bring me and what I bring? And over time I got comfortable with that. That took a while. And I did graduate from Harvard as the marshal of my class, and I was very grateful for that. But it was really intentional work to get there.
Wow. Let's talk then about mentors. I'm sure through all
Ándale.
this process,
Mm.
you had people who you consulted and guided you through all those waters of difficulty. Who should we know of? Who should we praise?
Mm. We cannot think about mentorship without thinking about our ancestors. When I think about, I introduced myself as the granddaughter of Soledad Castillo, and she came to this country with my mom strapped around her body, and across the Rio to get here. And I keep her. She's not with us anymore, and I keep her very close to me because I imagine she would always tell me, "Mija, like, like you can do it." Like if you like, she would, I don't know, I'm trying to avoid saying what I think she would really say to me, which is she tell me to like like stop being so weak, and like come on, like are you serious right now? And she was she faced so many hardships, and so what I think having her as an ancestor with me at all times is like having a constant mentor on your shoulders. And I carry her with me in everything I do. And she would tell me that I could do anything if I had the ganas to get there and to do it. And there's other mentors that also help you kind of move into certain roles that you may not have access to. I think about Kendra Ferguson, a Black woman who was my very first principal coach. And the way she modeled for me what it meant to be a woman of color in leadership, the way she modeled for me what it meant to live with integrity and by your values, um, and who is still a mentor to me today and is actually on my board right now. I think about Irma Zardoya, Puerto Rican sister from the Bronx, who saw in me what I didn't see in myself, and helped me kind of get to this level of becoming the LEO and president of the Leadership Academy. We always talk about Dario Collado, a friend of mine, um, always would talk about the elevator, el ascensor, right? He would say, "Hey, man, you're gonna go up in that elevator, but don't forget, throw it down for the next person. If you're not taking someone with you while you're moving up, then make sure to send it back down." And I felt like she did that for me, and I felt like so many people have done that for me. I think about Ellen Moore, a white woman from Santa Cruz, California, who led an amazing nonprofit called the New Teacher Center, and helped me understand what it meant to be a leader of a nonprofit, which was very different than being working at the district level or being a principal or a teacher. So there's been so many amazing mentors, and the way I try to pay it forward is by doing the same for others. And I've been very blessed with so many mentors, including my own mother, my own grandmother, my sisters.
Beautiful. So from a principal to a principal,
Mm.
what made you become a principal?
I always thought I would never enter the dark side. You know, you know how it is, Efrain. You're a teacher. You're like, really? Um, it was because I had parents. There were a group of parents from San Jose who went on a trip to New York City to see the small schools movement at the time, and it was being funded by a community organizing group called PACT, People Acting in Community Together. And they were a faith-based organization that would meet with parents after church, and they would talk about all the things they wanted to see in their community. In this particular case, East San Jose, and they would talk about healthcare and education. So they took them on this trip, and the parents, I got organized by an amazing parent named Maria Vizcara. Maria, her son David was in my class, seventh grade student. And she came to observe a class. And you know how this is. You're a teacher, someone's observing. You're like, yeah, you're like, anytime. My classroom's open. That's kind of how I rolled. Like, this is community. This is comunidad. This is not like my classroom. It's our classroom. And so she came in. She observed, a class. We sit down right afterwards, and I said, let's talk. Would you tell me anything? Ask me anything you want. Let's talk about David, how he's doing. And she's like, I don't want to talk about my son or your lesson. I want to talk about you. I want to talk about how we as parents have a vision for a middle school that we want in this community. It doesn't exist. And tonight we're getting together at a house and we are brainstorming, and we'd love for you to be there and be part of this. And Man, Efrain, she had me. She organized me, and she kept organizing me one-on-ones, meetings, until I agreed that I would not only be part of it, but that I would help to design it and be the principal to open it. And so that led me into leadership, leading a new small school of choice.
What a great example that the answer is in the room. With
That's
leaders
right.
coming all shapes and sizes with all
That's
sorts
right.
of degrees or non-degrees. A
Titles, no
leader is a
titles.
leader. Mhm.
Andale.
Beautiful. So, Nancy, um, do you remember a time where you transitioned to be the Nancy who you are today? Uh,
Interesting.
and the question is
Hmm.
phrasing this right. We all start at some point, and at some point there's a turning point. There's an experience that makes us detach from who we were, and we become
Hmm.
who we are.
That's a deep question, man. I mean, the whole reason we rewrote Stay and Prevail is because Roberto and I wanted to make sure that no matter who we become, that we never disconnect from our roots, from who we are, from what defines our core, from our comunidad, from the people and the familia that loved us, that raised us. And that can mean many different things, and you can give back in many different ways. But the person I'm now couldn't the person I am now is able to articulate that in a way I wasn't able to in the past. Like in the past, I may have thought it was, um, that it was really important just for me to be down. I had to like live and die in East San Ho. That's it. Like, I'm down. I'm one of the people. I'm a homegirl. Like, be a teacher forever. I mean, that's really what I wanted to do. I think what I learned through leadership is exactly what Wallace research showed us in 2021, was that teacher remains one of the single most important factors in a school environment, but the principal is as important and has greater scale. And so that, I think, is I know the potential of leadership today. I know when I accept these roles and I step into these moments, I know that there's power in that. I also know that I have to be really careful not to abuse that power. I have to know I have to be careful to be inclusive in my leadership. I know that I will not be effective if I ever forget who I am or where I come from. And I don't think I knew that my story was important back in the day. I remember, Efrain, when I was a principal, it took me until year 6 as a principal to tell my story. And guess what? My story was that my mama still lived 2 blocks down, and I never thought that was like, why wouldn't I think that was important? I thought it was like, vamos, like we got work to do. I was going to become the principal of the school my mother attended as a middle schooler. Let's think about that. I was going to become the principal of the school my mother attended as a middle schooler, of the school my siblings attended, my tios, my tias, and I didn't think that was important to tell. Why? And how do we set up these structures to where we think that, like, schooling is like, it's a factory model, or it's about, giving out, like, it's about building community. You cannot build community as a leader unless you bring your full self into that space. And so the leader I am today, I try very hard to bring all of me. It's still hard for me a little bit because it feels very vulnerable, but I challenge myself to do that more and more, because I know now that my story is important, that my experiences define who I am, that they also create the lens through which I lead, that my identity cannot be separate from my leadership. And those were just really hard lessons I think I've learned over time that I've now accepted.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Nancy, like in Back to the Future, if you
Mm.
could go back to any of the positions you have held in the past,
Ay, 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 Efrain. You're
what
killing
will
me.
what will the
You're killing
Nancy of
me.
today tell the
Ándale.
Nancy of back then?
Oh my. Ándale. What would any of the positions?
Any position. Ideally as a principal, since this is a show for
Ándale.
school leaders, but it could be as any position.
Ándale, ándale. Well, then let's talk about principalship. Um, I would have told, since now, the Leadership Academy, we are experts around principal development, and I've been able to learn a lot from these amazing colleagues I work with at the Leadership Academy, and from all leaders across the country. So I would probably tell myself, I was the principal of the new small school that I founded for only 2 years, and I'll be like, come on, sis, you really think like you can create an amazing school in 2 years? It's going to take you at least five. Like, come on now. I was lucky though that my co-founders would eventually become the principal of that school, so it was still the founding team, and the school would remain, become a California Distinguished School, Blue Ribbon. So we were able to sustain that work because of a more of a shared leadership model that we had. But I still would have been like, really, like, um, I also would have told myself when I became a turnaround school principal of the school I told you my mom attended,
Hmm.
I would have I would have given myself a little bit of grace. I would have said, baby girl, you cannot change everything in one year. You cannot. Don't forget about who you are. Don't forget yourself. Don't, like, I remember staying so late and leaving so early in the morning that I practically lived at my school in my office. You get this. You're still in the role,
Amen.
and losing relationships that were important to me, or disconnecting from them because work took over my life. I didn't know, and I would have told myself, you actually could be much more effective if you had a little balance. You could be much more effective if you were well rested. You could be much more effective if, you took care of yourself in order to take care of the school and everybody else, because you will deplete yourself, you will deplete your relationships. And I had to learn that the hard way in many cases. And so I think I would tell myself many things around leadership, around the, like, realistic ways that that it requires to lead change, the time and investment it requires, and the fact that you can't do any of this if you don't have yourself there fully, not half of you, not part of you, but all of you, to be there and jump into the work on a daily basis.
I concur with you. When I started as a principal, those two catastrophic 2 years when I started. I will leave the building at 11 o'clock or midnight, and
Oh,
arrive by 7 a.m. And the work was still there, the issues were still there, and
right,
nothing was
right.
solved. And I think that that is something that every new principal needs to know, that the building is always going to be on fire, and but you have to be well rested in order to try to make it better tomorrow.
And you know what? You one of the Jean Monnet, like one of the fathers of the founding fathers of the European. He talks about how he would get, you know, he was trying to unionize, right? Like and he taught. Can I just repeat what I just said?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in his complex work and trying to bring people together, right,
Mhm.
across communities, um, he talks about how he would get the answers to the most complex problems when he was in nature. And that has really struck me, right? Because and I even when I was a principal and like taking no breaks, it's like I get forced, by someone who loved me in my life to go on a 3-day vacation or spend a weekend by the beach or something. But it was during those moments when I actually got the answers to the questions that I was struggling with, and so I carry that with me today as
Beautiful.
well.
I
Yeah.
love that, and that's part of the productivity part. We Before we jump into that, I am very curious to know if you have to gift two books, one fiction and one non-fiction, to a loved one. What would those
Mm,
two books be?
mm. So not an educator to a loved one.
Anyone. It could be an educator. Those two books that are most
Mm.
significant to you.
You know what I'm thinking of? I'm thinking of Pablo Neruda, his poetry. I'm thinking of how meaningful that was for me during my college years. Um, and I'm also thinking of, gosh, I have a lot of nonfiction. I'm very serious. I'm a very serious reader here. Um, but I was also thinking of Angela Valenzuela and subtractive schooling and her work in Houston, and really thinking about how education sometimes strips, not sometimes, often strips kids of their identity as part of the schooling process, which was just like a fundamental book for me as I became an educator, and how I thought about the work and the world. Um,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. A part of the show is to know what is part of your wisdom. And
Mm.
let me ask you very little about your productivity before we jump into questions about the book. As you know, being successful includes being on top of our productivity, but this looks different for every kind of leader. Can you tell us about how do you get organized
Oh,
and still live a fructiferous life?
you come in with the hard questions, man. The fire.
And wait until I ask you about the book.
Andale. Ooh. Um, Juanita Lewis. Juanita Lewis is the most amazing, most organized partner in this work I've ever met, and she supports me. I have to know. You have to know what you do well and what you don't do well, um, and I do miss details, but Juanita Lewis never misses a detail, and so that is how I stay organized today. That is my current system,
And for those that
and I'm
don't
very
know,
grateful. I'm very grateful.
who is Juanita Lewis? So the people that don't
Juanita
know.
Lewis is a special assistant to the LEO, and also to the leadership cabinet of the Leadership Academy.
So how can principals then leverage the power that the secretaries have to ensure there's a good school system running?
Well, anyone who partners with you has to know you really well. And you have to actually be clear about what you need as well. So they're getting to know you, you're getting to know them. I think everything's about relationships, right? You don't have that relationship, you're going to miss each other, right? You're going to speak different languages. You're going to get frustrated by each other. When you can be clear in your communication, your needs, your wants. One of the things that has always works well is in any relationship, whether it's, the admin who supports you, with your assistant principal, anyone with your leadership team, Are you constantly doing, checking in with each other? Are you doing a plus delta? Are you doing a weekly, like 20, 30 minute, like what's working? What can we do better? You often have check-ins with people, but are you checking in about your relationship, the ways in which you work together? That is going to help you be more productive than anything. Because when you don't have that communication, you don't create a space for it, then the only time you're really going to talk is when you're frustrated with each other, and that doesn't work. You have to
Beautiful.
keep deepening the relationship, keep getting to know each other, by asking very explicit questions around feedback.
Weekly meetings, principles, plus and delta, what is working, what needs to improve.
That's it.
Building the
That was a
relation.
part of the process. When the process isn't there, things get sticky. We all know
Beautiful.
that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Let's take a brief pause and praise the Teach Better community.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
So let's talk about this book titled Stay and Prevail. Students of color don't need to leave their communities to succeed. Can you share with us the moment where you and Roberto decided, you know what? Let's make a book about these ideas and this work that we have been doing.
Mm. Dr. Deborah Joel Sherman, who is the author of the forward effort, and I don't know if you had a chance to dig into that forward. It is one of the most beautiful
Yeah, from the block,
forwards
right? Jeffrey from the
ever.
block.
Debbie from the block.
Mm-hmm.
No, Debbie from the Bronx.
From the
You're
Bronx.
confusing it with Jenny from the block, but yes, but Jenny from the block is from the Bronx too. But it's Debbie from the Bronx. We all know her as Dr. Deborah Jo Sherman, a Harvard professor. We all know her as, the state superintendent of the year. We all know her as a superintendent of Richmond, Virginia, back in the day. We know her on so many levels, but she's Debbie from the Bronx. And it is a moment when she shares, she really, dives into what it was like to lift up the beauty of her home community. She introduced Roberto and I want to say it's 2023. She probably introduced us about 13 years ago. And one of the things that we immediately connected with Roberto and I, and he is now my brother from another mother. I love him so much. And the reason we connected even deeper was because we realized that we were both committed to giving back to the home that raised us. And I think honestly, Efrain, that's where the concept of this book came from. All the conversations, like, oh, wait, so you're from East San Ho and you gave back. Yeah. Oh, wait, yeah, you're from New York. So, it was like, we just got so excited because, we hadn't met each other, a person like that, or at least within that period of time in our own journeys, and really connected on that. And it continued to be a story. So, for example, when Miguel Cardona was named our Secretary of Ed, Roberto and I looked at each other. We said, he gave back to the home that raised him. He's from Merida, Connecticut. He, was a teacher and a school principal in his home community. Like, why isn't that being talked about? And so we wrote a piece for Ed Week called Miguel Cardona Shows That You Don't Have to Leave to Succeed. When Misha Porter was named the first Black female chancellor in New York City, we wrote a piece called Porter Shows That a Local Can Lead. And we just started to really pick up on these ideas around like why is no one lifting up the fact that that our the most amazing members of our community are doing their thing. Like, why isn't that important? Why are we always lifting up the people who come from the outside and do the work? And so it became really important to us to name it. We also coined the term leave to succeed mindset, that people, even with the best of intentions, I'm sure we've all been guilty at some point, is that you begin to pluck out a few students from Black and Latino communities and saying, hey, it looks like you have potential. Like, you should go there, whatever it is. And it often means leaving the people in the home that raised you. And that's just really became a passion project for us. And we just started writing. And it's been a really beautiful process to write about this, something you love so much together.
Beautiful. So one of the questions that you just answered is what is the live to succeed mindset? So let me dig in with a specific example. In the book, of the many vignettes of examples, there is a teacher called, I think it's pronounced Mr. Heatherpole, I
Oh
believe,
my
right?
goodness. Efrain, you're going deep. Yes,
Yeah,
Mr.
yeah.
Heatherford.
So
Wow.
basically, a well-meaning educator
Yeah.
who was trying to extract um, the students that he thought had potential,
Yeah.
and he will say a direct, not even a microaggression, a direct aggression that if you stay in this town, female, you will get pregnant, right?
Mhm.
So, how can principals support well intentioned educators who have this live to succeed mindset in a way that is conducive to productive change?
Mm.
And I am phrasing it in this way.
Mhm.
Sometimes principals want to change everyone's mindset and they come across as I am right and
Mhm.
you are wrong, and
Mhm.
that is conducive to fights between adults that end up not supporting students. What are your thoughts on that?
Mm. I think we've talked about it today. I think it's all about relationships. How are you building intentional relationships? Look, any work around equity, I think what Roberto and I are doing is we're naming very explicit terms and an equity that shows up in communities, in our home communities. We're naming it really explicitly. If you're trying to tackle any inequity, whether it's the leave to succeed mindset or any deficit based mindset, whether it's low expectations, there are so many different deficit based mindsets we can name. Um, it requires being able to name it for the person, being able to, and Leadership Academy actually has like 6 different equity dispositions that allow for some tools to name it, to confront it, to support, to partner up in order to dismantle, with your team. And so I think that's it. I think it falls, and you'll notice too, if in any hard conversations we have about anything, if we don't know the person well, if they don't know us well, if we don't trust each other's intentions, it likely is not going to go well. Right. So, in this case, yes, we're highlighting leave to succeed, but you need the relationship. And if you don't have that, then it's really hard to really change mindsets, to really shift. The other thing that I think, you alluded to in your question is that there's can be this like false dichotomy that like somehow I've I'm enlightened and I've, gone through my journey and I'm here now and, like let me help you, be more like me. And you can't come across savior-ish either. Like you got to come across as a lifelong learner, as someone who still makes mistakes, as someone who is doing their best to really recognize the biases they hold and how their lived experiences show up in the work. And that we are all on a learning journey together. People are much more likely to respond to when you are in the learning journey with them versus like some holier than thou attitude that you need them to arrive where you've landed. And I think being super self aware is the answer to to really moving mindsets, because people have to trust you. When we don't have trust, then people are just going to feel like you're just trying to like nitpick and you're trying to like corner them and you're trying to do things that are unfair. When in reality, James Baldwin says, if we love each other, and if you love me, you're going to help me see the things I don't see.
Beautiful. This is a master class. Thank you so much. I think like Brené Brown says, being vulnerable is key for success. And I
Interesting.
think
Yeah.
personally, I have failed, and in many ways because I think that's the way I was taught, and maybe many of us were taught that you come with all these answers, and nobody tells you, but be aware, don't come across as and they don't, because that creates all these issues. So
Mm.
in terms of um,
Can I just pause you there though? But
yes,
I think the issue though is that you're getting messages from, whether it's from central office or whether it's from, that you should know. You're getting you're there's an expectation that as a school leader, that as a leader in any case, that you do have the answers. What you actually have are a set of experiences that can help you partner with the individual, with the community, to find the answers best for that context. There's a difference.
Beautiful. And the
There's a
book
difference.
says that your resume is going to last you 15 minutes.
My mentor would
Uh,
always tell me that, Bob Keegan. Yes.
absolutely.
He said,
Absolutely.
he said, kid, you got a great resume. It'll last you 15 minutes. What will matter is how you treat people,
Wow.
how you engage, the relationships you have. And that's spot on.
So there's all this saying that you cannot be a prophet on your own land, yet you and Roberto are emphasizing that you don't have to live to succeed.
Hmm.
How do you address this thing that often the community might not see you as being able to make the difference, and they feel that they need to bring an outsider to bring the change?
Look, it's a whole mindset. It's not just a mindset of individuals, it's a mindset of an entire community. And I think that's our intent to call that out. And we do it to each other. We do it to each other. We do it to, like, this is not like, look at what white people do to people of color situation. We're saying this is a mindset that exists among all of us, and myself included. Like, when you're back to Beverly Tatum and the smog, when we're all living it and breathing it. I also want to put some of the criticism we've gotten around this message. I think it's really hitting a nerve. A friend of mine, Dr. Eva Mejia, who leads the education arm of IDEO, and who you should talk to because she is crazy brilliant. She said, I think you're hitting a nerve because people are struggling to separate poverty and violence and safety and poverty from race and community. And we can unpack that for an entire podcast. So there's we're not saying, you're a sellout if you leave your home and don't get, like, we're not. My brother had to leave. My brother got involved in gangs. My mom had to send him to a different place for a while. He returned and now does work, in juvenile hall, like really mentoring and coaching, kids who had similar struggles to what he. And so what we're saying, I love and I respect and honor my brother so much. And what we're saying is, don't turn your back on the community that raised you. Don't abandon it. There are multiple ways to give back. You could do what I did. You could go back and be a principal in your home community. And that was one of the best things I've ever done with my career. You could also give back financially. You could also be a mentor. You could also, something I do now that I live in New York City, something that I do is often, if there are folks who want to talk about, what it would mean to go to, to move to the East Coast, what it would mean to go to a place like Harvard, what it would, I talk to a lot of folks just to try to help out in every way I can. For me, that's giving back. It's a lot of my time. I give back to the universities financially that helped me get to where I am. So there's so many different ways you can give back. And I think that's our message. It's not like there's only one way to do things, stay there, never leave. It's like, can that be an option for us to be successful? Can we redefine success so that part is included too? And that's our win. And if we can create a space where people catch themselves saying, like, hey, like, you're smart, you have potential, maybe this high school is better for you than our local, they might just consider the intended and unintended consequences of that suggestion.
Beautiful. Thank
And
you
they
so
might
much.
have a real conversation with the kid and the family versus, I'm your savior, let me save you. And now I'm going to go tell everyone about the change I made in this kid's or family's life.
So,
Okay.
talking about the specific instruction to the students, you guys cite Pedro Noguera that we must walk away from the pobrecito mentality. We must have high expectations for students. Uh, Yet, sometimes this can be misconstrued and sometimes misinterpreted. What are your thoughts and advice on how to encourage how can principals encourage teachers to have to be rigorous with the students and walk away from that mentality that, oh, poor student, they are going through so many struggles, yet acknowledging that they are?
One of the things I like to think about is what I want for my own kid or a kid I love. Make a list, literally. Next to that, juxtapose it against what we're actually giving to kids within this work I'm doing, within the school I'm in, the classroom I'm in, and then do a gap analysis. What's the gap between what you want for your own, the kids you love, your nieces, your nephews, your friends' kids, whoever, your kids? What are you actually giving, and what's the gap, and why? And I think that is always just a healthy gauge of where you are missing the mark as an educator. As Lisa Delpit warned us back in the day, other people's children, like we see each other as other people's children and not as the village that serves our children together, we treat them like other people's children. So there's a mindset shift there. And then I think the other piece too, more technical, is capacity. Do teachers have the tools they need to really raise the bar, to lift expectations in a way that that is meaningful for kids? And sometimes that requires that we keep teachers fresh and connected to the latest and greatest of resources and materials and trainings and all the things they need to do it well, because the world is evolving and we have to keep folks learning and with that learning stance as they go. Sometimes it's a mindset issue, sometimes it's a skill issue, will or skill.
People that have talked about and worked to create new cultures and systems of learning. One of the examples that stuck with me the most was the example of Richard Carranza, the previous chancellor of the New York Public Schools. One of the big shifts is that he wanted educators to see English learners as multilingual learners. Yet bringing this change really struck a chord with so many people in power that many viewers see that action of change costing him his job. So the question then is, how can educational leaders bring the change without ended up unemployed?
Look, you have to figure out your risk tolerance. I think that some people lead in a way that they're like, let's burn the house down, let's get things done. I want to call it out. Other people are more tempered radicals. They might be pulling some things behind the scenes. I know that Richard Carranza, someone I greatly admire and respect, he was he would actually say explicitly, he would say, we are so busy trying to keep our job that we're not doing our job. And he would say that a lot. And so he had a very high risk tolerance. And I think if you talk to him today, he would probably have very few regrets about how he moved when he was superintendent of San Francisco or of Houston or of New York City. And so I think it's about your risk tolerance, about what you're willing to do and what you're willing to lose. And I also think that we have to really respect each other's leadership styles and stances. There's too much judgment on, oh, you're not willing to do this or that, when the reality is that we need multiple types of leaders who have varying leadership stances and styles to really move the work forward. Without all of us on that continuum, the work is not going to move forward. And so I think we also have to have acknowledgement of how we do this as a system, as a community of leaders, and really support each other in fully stepping into the stance that we take as individuals.
Beautiful.
And Efrain, my brother, I am going to have to roll pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, last question.
Sorry. Andale. And let me just,
last question, I promise.
My meeting to say I'm a couple minutes late. Sorry about that.
The last question for you is, when you were a principal with your team, you flipped the script on behavior and students were sent to the office.
You really read that book, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. I told you, if you gave me the book, I would read it. I'm a reader. You praise the students for good behavior, and that's an example of something that leaders can do. Can you walk us through that experience?
The very first year of the turnaround school, I had, I want to say 1,556 behavior referrals. Crazy amount. It was a discipline factory. And you can get very reactive. And I think we did. I think I made a lot of mistakes. And, you can get very reactive and we're going to do, and we're going to be tough. Or you can get proactive. And that was the smartest thing we could have done. We created what we called the E-squared referral, exhibiting excellence. And what that meant was that teachers were not able to send kids to my office for misbehaving. They were only able to send kids to my office for exhibiting excellence, and they did. It became part of the culture of how we rolled. And we created it just like the bad behavior referral where, like, I used to get detention and suspension all the time when I was younger, and you walk to the office and you're carrying and like a checklist, and like, there's like 15 things of the why you're so terrible checked, and you're looking at it on the way. We did the same thing. We had a list of so many things you could have done amazing, and the teacher checked it, and it was on the triplicate, and they would tear it off and go to the office, go tell Ms. G, you're amazing. I can't take this. And they'd get there, and the first thing I'd do is I'd call the parent. And it was one of the most incredible shifts of our culture that I've ever experienced. It was beautiful. Students would carry them in their binder, where you could, on the front, just to be very proud. Teachers would put it up behind their desk, a bunch of them, and you could do as many as you wanted over time. That's what we did.
Beautiful. Nancy, it has been an honor to have you in the show.
Honor was mine. The honor was mine.
Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Andale, Efrain. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efrain Martinez.
Chulo.
And I love that production. Chill out.